And live from Brussels and all your favorite channels on the internet, it's ZN Live. And today we are very excited to have an action-packed panel. We have a special guest, Kai Troll, who's an experienced communicator, has been working across a range of different fields, including sports and culture, and is one of the co-founders of the Association World, which covers a whole range of different conferences and workshops that we're going to talk about. And to engage with him, we have the Dream Workshop team that was actually recently in Brussels animating a workshop on branding and social media. Irem, Marcella, and Evie, who have been who work with ZN on a range of different projects. So Kai, I want to come to you first. I know that your travel plans are incredibly packed. You are headed to Washington and then Montreal, or in the other way. So a lot of things happening. What is the big topic emerging in the association world right now? Is it AI? Is it misinformation? Is it election? What's on their mind?
Phil, it's exactly the topic that your team and the ladies all covered at the recently held BF, which is AI and whole communication around that, understanding that a bit more, but also looking at the practical implication, because I think everybody has a pretty good understanding why AI and the use of that is so important. But I think what you were able to demonstrate at BF was really the practical use of it, and also how to then do the social media around it. So I think that was really fabulous. Is something that associations are practicing and trying to figure out how to do this. And I think that's what we're trying to address, is how to do this, how does it help me, and what do I actually need to understand in order to do so.
Yeah, and it's been fascinating because we started this conversation last year in Geneva and discussed, how do associations approach AI? What can they do? And with AI, what's crazy is that it's kind of early days, but everything's happening very fast. And I think there are two really important things that are happening right now, which is basically the creation of GPTs on OpenAI's ChatGPT platform, which means you can create kind of little GPTs that are specifically focused on a topic. And the same technology is being used by Microsoft with the copilots, and that allows you to create, I would say, much more elaborate tools to work in a different way. So we are really looking deep into this. It is still a kind of experimental process, but it's getting more exciting every single day, and we're really learning how best to take advantage of that. So I believe, Irem, you have some questions for Kai.
Yes, I wanted to ask you, Kai, like you're organizing workshops in all the major cities in Europe, Brussels, we were part of it, Geneva, Phil was there. We've talked about Amsterdam, London. You are going to the Americas to do more there. How do you ensure that the content and the topics of the workshops or the discussions that happen are tailored towards the local needs and what they want to hear? How do you make that balance across the different countries that we travel to?
Yeah, I mean, basically, what we need to do is really, like you said, tailor to this. And there are also different understandings or needs or interests on the different continents and in different locations. So, for example, the agenda at BF in December was very different to the agenda that we had last June at GF and the agenda that we have now next week in Washington or in Montreal the week after. And the reason for that is because we use focus group discussions to gain an understanding of what we actually need to do, what are the relevant topics. So we basically, for example, for now upcoming Washington, we had 6 focus group discussions. We talked to 5-6 people each in these focus group discussions, and basically they told us what the relevant topics are, because obviously, the topics from that were priority last June can pretty much change, but also some topics stay relevant, like strategic planning, fundraising, and so on, governance. They are ongoing topic. But when we talk about then AI or communication, then I think we need to really look at what is going on. So, Phil gave a presentation on AI and communications in June. You covered something very different actually at BF because people wanted more the practical application of it. And now we have other events coming up that then talk about and discuss a bit more the situation with the EU elections and how associations can campaign towards that and so on. So basically, it's not a big secret about it. We just run focus group discussions, gain a pretty good insight about what associations want to discuss and what they find relevant at this moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
From my perspective, Kai, I wanted to ask you, from your experience, what are some of the key challenges that associations and nonprofits are facing today? And how do you think Association World addresses these challenges through its programs and initiatives?
Yeah, I think what we tried to do since the very beginning, 5 years ago, when Association World was founded, we're trying to take a holistic approach and view towards the education and learning of and development of association professionals and associations in general. So we don't look at specific topics generally. So we really understand that our events are interesting to all sorts of people, whatever they do within an association, and it is not only the secretary general or the event person. Your session at BF was very much attended by a lot of different people, but also communications people and public affairs people who typically don't go to this type of events. But because we did that session, they came to the event. So when we look at this holistic approach of things, we are also then thinking, how do we, for example, use AI or communication overall? What role does that play in the all year round strategy and planning? And not only looking at events from one event to the other event or workshops from one workshop to the other. AI, I think associations need to understand that this affects the entire organization. It does not only affect PR, public affairs, events, but everything within the organization. And that is something that we are trying to promote, but also need to deliver practical examples there.
Definitely, of course.
I think it's really interesting, the whole discussion about AI actually, and it kind of links to some of the trends and innovations that are being implemented in the industry on how to stay ahead of the curve. And it will be maybe interesting for our audience to know as well from an association world point of view, what are some of the practical applications that you mentioned here that you are applying in the day-to-day to, make yourself stand out of the crowd?
Yeah, I think generally we all need to do better in this space. I don't think, that we are nearly there where associations need to be when it comes to strategic communication, the use of AI. I think we generally need a lot of guidance on this. And I think the reality is also that it needs investment one way or the other. It needs investment to help associations. Unless you create that in-house, it needs investment in order to get that guidance and in others helping in that whole strategic planning. The application, we have workshops that where we sit together and we share best practices about who is using what tool and what application and so on. But I think at some point people reach the limit unless they actually get the professional expertise. And I don't know where it goes, but clearly the development is changing so quickly that it's an ongoing process. And I think that is something new that we need to have on the radar, that part alone needs additional investment within an organization.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, and I have a question on this because when we're looking at, again, AI, and you remember what we talked about, which is that there's a lot of hype, and the hype makes it difficult to actually understand, what you need to do, what you need to learn, because people in associations are very busy. They have conferences to attend. They have work to do. They can't spend all their time testing out the new tools. And the communication around AI is very confusing. It's kind of like, oh, with this thing, you can create your conferences without doing anything, and this will do your whole communication strategy. And although it does amazing things, in reality, it doesn't actually work by just pushing a button, entering a prompt. You actually have to really spend time testing the tools, trying to get it right. In fact, we've been playing with the AI tools, both in visual terms on the Zeitgeist newsletter, where actually recently there's a fabulous video of Irem who actually is introducing the newsletter, all of it 100% generated by AI. And
I saw that. That's amazing.
It's and honestly, like, we do it every week, and so even week by week, it's starting to get better. So it is kind of like, wow, these tools are progressing as we use it, which means technically, Irem could be reading out a little article or doing a little video without having to kind of shoot it, record it, and all that. Which again, I think further down the line will start having very practical implications. But what I think, what I'm interested in is, associations also tend to be quite slow at adapting new technology in their work. Often it's kind of like, well, we have to deal with 25 members. So getting all those members aligned on something is already a big job, let alone using new technology to do things. So in your judgment, how open to change are associations, given that they're living in a world where, we can agree change is accelerating? Are they adapting faster now? Have you observed some changes over the years? Or is it still perhaps the biggest challenge of associations is to adapt to change? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think associations becoming more mission driven. And I think there's a better understanding now that if they want to have impact and want to deliver change or have influence on change, that they need to do a lot of things quite differently, especially in the areas that maybe were not so high on the agenda before, like communication. We used to communicate related to EU matters. We communicate around the events. But what associations still need to get much better in is to create all year round communication strategy. And that is not done by an Instagram posting or LinkedIn posting. If it doesn't come together, all the activities have to come together. And I think boards understand that, because typically when a new board comes in, they also actually want to create impact for the time being. I just came from an Irish music conference, not a festival, but a conference. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because there you had songwriters, you had record labels, you had media. And one of the big topics related to AI was that there is now an initiative and a big discussion going on about artists being worried or worrying that their music or their songs could be faked, AI related, so that their voice could be taken over by someone else who can sing and basically does what they do. So that is a big discussion, and I think when you have musicians, songwriters, and others, then that's how they make their money. That is their daily bread, is sell songs on Spotify, on iTunes and all that. So they're getting really worried and also try to gain an understanding. So it affects them directly and personally, and they have it very much on the radar. And I think it's an industry that is very, very vibrant, and I would hope that associations at some point also say, yes, actually, this is urgent. We talk about being nice, we do important things, but there are also things that are very urgent to cover and to discuss, and that is clearly one of them, because otherwise people will be left behind.
Yeah, and I think there's a shift that's happened since digital, which is still a new environment that people are still developing new skills and tools, which is that with that you can talk directly to a much broader public. The old association was really talking to the decision makers, the policy makers, and the journalists, but now they can represent the voice of an industry online and tell people, these are the messages that we have for our audience. And I see that Stefan Macy, who has been very active in the space of public affairs, says, yes, AI governance, a big theme we'll see throughout the year for associations in public affairs and beyond. Indeed, making sure that the AI tools don't become our overlords and that we all end up living in these little kind of vacuum tubes and the matrix style world. So I think we need to be looking out for that. Now, I think one very interesting potential development with AI and digital is that I think associations can become much more impactful, because what happens with AI is you suddenly have tools that can translate messages in a lot of languages to a pretty impressive level. And the second thing is you can kind of redistribute and adapt messages if you have well-trained AI systems. Now, I believe that this is early days, but I think it might transform the way that we use this and really put associations in a leading role. Have you seen any of that happening? And by the way, hi Daniel, and thanks for saying Happy Friday. Kai, what do you think about whether this could bring associations to another level?
Yeah, we had 4 webinars on AI in general last year in each quarter, and the developments and the discussions have really progressed by the quarter. So it was actually amazing to see that whole development from first quarter to the end of the year. And one discussion that we had and people came up with were saying, we as associations should actually help feed AI in order to also, bring in our terminology, our, works that we do, because I think when, people go in and whatever they're looking for, we can actually help sort of set content within the AI system or in the word. So that is something that was encouraged, that people said, okay, we actually should be feeding content into AI, and that this also is then considered when people are looking for things or giving in feeds or whatever. So I think that is something where in early stages maybe associations said, okay, that's actually not a bad idea, because if this isn't in there, someone else will interpret what we do, then it's better us doing that.
Yes, definitely. I do agree with your observation. I also think that, coming also from, the workshop that we held during BF on brand ambassadorship, and we also touched upon, like AI and content creation from the association members. We see as a big trend, coming from last year, but also continuing in this year, that on social media, specifically in the communication of social media, human relationships with the brands and associations of users with the accounts that they follow are much more directed towards the people elements. And I think that we all cannot disagree that employees are going to be the community connectors of the upcoming years. And during the workshop, we saw a lot of people being very, very interested in everything that we had to say. And we were pleasantly surprised to also see that a lot of these people followed, the tips that we handled out, and they started implementing it in real life. What do you think is the potential of people better communicating about the work that their associations are doing? Do you think it's going to amplify the reach? Do you think it's something that is very much needed in order to kind of make sure that we amplify the message on the work that you're doing every day?
Absolutely. I think that is something where we will see a lot of change this year, because I think with the use of AI and maybe more strategic approach towards communications overall, and connecting the dots within organizations, that is definitely something, especially related to the EU elections. Of course, now I think associations start getting prepared for that, also the pre-communication, but then also in terms of the stakeholder mapping afterwards, once everything is in place again. So I think it's a fundamental year actually for associations to get things right in that space, and it's probably worthwhile individual workshop, to actually get associations ready for that. I feel everybody's trying to figure this out by themselves, but it's always good to then also bring people together occasionally who then have the same struggles and are actually looking for the same things. And what we should be able to do is to help at least provide the platform or help find the common solutions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that what we're observing is that the most important thing is to find the balance between the organization communicating and its individuals, without telling everybody, hey, you have to become a brand ambassador and you have to communicate these profound posts about life and strategy, but more, look, we have a story that we're telling as an organization, but if you amplify, if you comment, if you talk about it, it kind of helps to really bring that story to life. And I think finding that balance is probably, I would say one of the biggest challenges of communicators going forward, because they, often you don't want to be communicating a pure corporate message, but also you don't see yourself as just a pure brand ambassador. You just want to kind of engage in the right way. I want to ask you one question that we always ask, I guess, which is, if you meet somebody today who's starting a career in the association world, they're 20 years old, they're 20-something, they graduated, what is your one most important advice to them?
I mean, I'm currently in that process of hiring about 10 people, so that question is very relevant. What I tell them is that they really need to identify with the organization. And I would say that, I mean, you would have that in UPS and P&G and Coca-Cola type of environments as well, maybe for different reasons. But I think, you really have to work for an organization, because for an associations or nonprofit, because you actually want to make a difference. And a difference that is for the greater good of the society. So that identification, the internalization, to adopt to that organizational culture, I think is important. A lot of associations don't actually really feel they have an organizational culture. So I think that is one element that, that we need to do. I would say, that most organizations would wonder what is their organizational culture, but it's that identification, the personal identification with that organization that you work for, because I work in a very decentralized way. So I need people to take ownership and be responsible. And that you can really only do and work like that when you give people that responsibility, but then they also, need to feel that they are really part of running that organization.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good comment. And in fact, last week, we brought together the ZN network. So people from all over Europe actually came to Brussels. We had people online and we had people in the room. And I think, the most important thing that came out of that was a very enthusiastic, positive energy that the people had. And I think the reason they did is because they connect with the values of ZN and the fact that it's a certain kind of people that is really excited about new technology, new trends, that likes to work remotely so that they can travel. So there's a series of things. And I think what you said is absolutely correct. You need to have the right fit with the organization. And so we talk a lot about, finding the right match between people and clients, between tasks and skills. And often I think people, where you get it very wrong is if you're in the wrong organization, and it's just personal. It's like, it might be wrong for you because it's just not what you're interested in, or it's not the right value. So it's not about saying, oh, this is a terrible organization. It's not right for you. Once you have the right match, I think it creates enormous energy and then autonomy, as you just mentioned. So now let's move to our recommendations. So Evie, I'm going to go with you first. What are your recommendations for our viewers this week?
My recommendation this week is a very fun yet insightful page on LinkedIn called Pretty Little Marketeer. I think they also have social media presence on other platforms as well, but LinkedIn is the one that I'm more, interested in and looking, throughout the week. It's a community of people in social media. It's very insightful, but in a fun way. It provides great examples of creative B2C campaigns primarily, but also trends prediction, which always, from my perspective, align with our predictions from ZN and the weekly newsletter insights that we provide as well. But also they have their own marketing news column every week, which is a bit, more B2C oriented. So if you're interested, check it out. I think it's very, very nice. And the visual, elements that they're using are also very pleasing.
Well, pretty cool title. So how could you wrong with that? Thank you.
Yes.
Marcella, what about your recommendation?
My recommendation, as always, is another podcast. So this time it's Everyone Hates Marketeers by Louis Grenier. So I hope I'm pronouncing this right, because my French is not the best. But the idea is that every week, basically, the host is interviewing guests who share actionable insights on how you can stand out from the crowd, and they're not sugarcoating anything about it. You can also learn a lot from experts on, how to shake up industries when they hate change and they don't know how to pivot and how to adapt. So it's all about embracing agility. There's lots of interesting things also on psychological biases, but you have to check out the episodes to learn more. It's quite engaging.
Great. And what about you, Iram?
My recommendation has nothing to do with marketeers for a change. I actually have a YouTube channel. I think we talked about this in ZN Live maybe many, many years ago. It's not a new one. It's called Kurzgesagt. It's German. I hope I'm not butchering the pronunciation, which apparently means like in a nutshell or said in a short way. They do animations on YouTube, like very short 2-minute minimalistic animations that are using flat 3D design style, which I know is making a comeback for the past couple of years. But basically, it's like the Netflix series Explained. They do discuss scientific, technological, sometimes even philosophical subjects in very short videos, but they are very educational, I think. And I love the animations and I love the voiceover. So I use that during my lunch break sometimes just to, watch something, decompress, but also educate myself.
Excellent. Kai, what are your recommendations for our viewers today?
Yeah, it's also a podcast. Actually, it's 2 recommendations. I didn't listen to podcasts a lot, but I last year became a fan of podcasts, to be honest. So one podcast I would like to recommend is one that Cedric Dumont is actually running. Cedric is an ambassador of Red Bull. Phil, you met him. He talked about his experience and how he prepares for his base jumps and the things that he does, and how we try to convey that to association executives. So I would like to recommend that. It's Mind to Win step in mind, and it's really starting where others maybe stop thinking. He has guests there that are highly professional, either sports celebrities or also newcomers, and they share a bit of motivation and share their stories, out of which I get a lot of motivation when I'm stuck sometimes. So when I need a bit of a break, then I listen to that. And the other one is, and I think Stephen was actually online, so thank you, Stephen. It's Stephen's newsletter, LinkedIn newsletter on public affairs. He covers a lot on AI in governance, and vice versa. So I think, to me, that is really one of the best newsletters that is produced and came out lately. And it's a piece of writing that definitely shouldn't be missed. He puts a lot of work in there, and to be honest, it's highly accurate. So I love it.
Excellent. And actually, we're going to have Stephen Massey on the show, and he's started a Discord community for public affairs professionals, which is kind of interesting platform to use. So that's and he's got quite a lot of people, quite a lot of discussion. So quite fascinated to hear from him. He just said thank you, Kai. So he's actually listening to us right now. Yeah. Excellent. And I want to finish with a recommendation for another podcast, because I think we're doing podcasts today, connected to 2 books actually. So the podcast is by Dan Harris, who wrote a book called 10% Happier, and also has a podcast of the same name, as well as an app for meditation. And one of his recent podcast topics interview is the science of optimal performance at work and beyond with Daniel Goleman. Daniel Goleman is actually the person who wrote the emotional intelligence book 10, 20 years ago. So he kind of came up with the word EQ and a whole discussion around this. And he's written a book called Optimal Performance, which is his latest book, kind of about finding flow at work and at home. And I think it's a really fantastic examination of the topic. It's science-based, so it's not, affirmations and manifestations, which I think for me are always the downside of self-development. What I really like is when it's grounded in science and research, and it's pragmatic things, and I think Daniel Goleman is fantastic for that. So I think that's all we have time for, Kai. It's been great having you with us today. Always love having you, in the room when we get to exchange ideas with the association world community. So let's keep in touch. Have a fantastic weekend. Enjoy your travels, and we will see you online.
Thank you very much. Happy Friday. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.